So let's get into some of the latest news that's been happening since we've last gotten together. Couple of things. It is March. Hot topic on everyone's mind is March Madness. People are going to be filling out their brackets.
Yep.
Lots of bad beats will be happening through our brackets.
Yep.
We've done a couple of brackets, which you have not come close to winning.
Oh my gosh.
But we won't let that last too long on anyone's brain. But let's start off with March Madness. Why is March Madness something that is so universally just everyone can get behind it? No matter if you ever watched a single college game, like what do you think that is that like why people are all into March Madness when this time comes around?
You're talking about women's basketball, right?
Yeah, of course. Let's start there.
Yeah.
Although women's college basketball does get attention during March. It does.
Yeah,
I don't know how much attention.
It gets attention because they have lesser hotel stays and gyms to practice in. But the last I looked, the women's March Madness tournament brings in a whopping negative, I think it was $26 million.
No way.
Costs the NCAA $26 million to host the women's event. Okay. The men's event is the biggest producing sport across all sports for any college, period. It's the highest producing with an upwards, I don't know if it's broken 300 million, but the NCAA brings in close to 300 million. Okay. Anyway, I know that wasn't the question, but
okay. Rest my case.
It is astonishing.
I rest my case.
And people want equality. It's like, well, guess who brings in the money?
I guess if I'm really honest with myself, I turn on the women's one because it's the best. Because you're
learning a lot about.
I turn it on because the men aren't playing. That's it's in the season of it. Like it's.
The men are always playing. That's starting with the beauty of March Madness is that it's always on.
Towards the back end of it. Towards the back end of it.
Yeah. I mean, but like even before Caitlin Clark, you would turn it on?
That's an even better question. I think there might have been 1 or 2 years where I might have. But like when they get to like the Elite Eight.
And on the Caitlin Clark thing, I mean, it's just objectively impressive when someone can just pop up a three like anywhere.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, okay, like this girl can actually play.
Yeah.
She's sticking to her lane, right?
Some of them go in though. Like it's not like it looks really good when it's happening, but like as many of them didn't go in.
Fun exercise to the listeners. If you look up the top 10 plays of the WNBA for 2023, let's say, and then you look up the top 10 plays of like New York State high school basketball for the month of January, just as a modest exercise, you will for men, you will be astonished.
Yeah.
You'll be like, those guys are straight ballers, and I watched women, 8 of the 10 were layups.
They might have did a little behind the back, and it was a great play.
Like one of them maybe, and it was an accident. Anyway,
okay, back to March Madness though. Like, why is there so much excitement around March Madness? Like, why are we rallying behind this every single year?
Competition is a good time, and it's a lot of competition in a short time, so it holds our attention because it's not this real long-term project. We know that within a few weeks, it's all going to find its closure. And on any given day, somebody's going home. So I think if it was like every game was a 2 or 3 game format against the same team, it would not have the attention. Because it's every game is one and done. And in D1 sports, any team can beat any team. But all season, right, you have this buildup that like these are the good teams and these teams aren't. So it's a real, I think, inherent love of underdog and Cinderella stories like David and Goliath, which, I mean, another fun little case study would be like, as you watch March Madness this year, take a note of how many times the announcers, who might have not be Christian at all, probably most of them are not, are going to say David and Goliath, because it's just so inherent. Because David and Goliath is an epic story of an epic reversal of proportions of this small, weak shepherd boy defeating this giant, and that's what you get to see. And it can happen on any night. The passion of the players is also so intense because for a lot of them, this is their identity in an idolatrous way. This is all they know. And I'm sure you'll hear that too amongst the announcers. It's really hard for these guys to transition out of this. And yeah, it is, but that's also because they've been bred to idolize it. And basketball is never going to be the same. D1 basketball is about as glorious as it gets, honestly. I'm sure there's even a lot of pros who'd be like, yeah, those were the glory days. I just make money now playing basketball. And now you can even make money in the college, a lot of money. So there's a lot of passion out there because for a lot of these guys, this is their dream and it's about to conclude.
It's interesting that you say that because now we're seeing kids stick in school longer because they're collecting checks.
Yeah.
And the American Athletic Conference, which has Army, Navy, and the like, so not one of the biggest conferences, but because of the new NCAA sanctions, these conferences and schools in these conferences are going to have to start paying minimum dollar amounts to their athletes. And it just came out that the American Athletic Conference is going to pay out $10 million at a minimum to all of their athletes.
The conference is going to pay them?
Yep, the conference. So every school in the conference has to pay their students $10 million in benefits. It's not all cash. It can be probably between tuition.
In total,
probably total spread out amongst all their athletes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the minimum amount.
And what do you know the incentive of the conference doing this is to be competitive with bigger conferences or?
No, that's just based upon what the NCAA deemed that they have to do for profit sharing.
Oh, the NCAA
deemed NCAA is deeming that these conferences have to pay out minimums based upon their profit sharing. So I think it just depends on what each conference is making.
I gotcha.
But American Athletic Conference is most people, if you said those names in the football spectrum, like those aren't even close to being the big schools.
Yeah.
So if you think about more like the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, those schools.
Mountain West.
Cool little 200,000. No, they'll probably be in the millions for sure. They're bigger than the AAC. Yeah. But so then you just mentioned that there's not a single event other than March Madness that grosses more than any other thing. So are these athletes being put in danger? Is it ruining the integrity of the sports? Or is it just the case of like the worker deserves his wages? Like
for them to get paid?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the worker deserves their wages. The money's coming in.
Yeah.
So somebody's making the money. The question is who should be making the money? They're not manufacturing the money like the Federal Reserve, or the magistrate just saying like, we're just going to send money even if we don't have it. So these are sports on college campuses that are actually bringing in X number of dollars. Somebody's getting that money. And it might be the entity of the school or specifically the basketball program. And up until the reversal of paying student athletes, it might have just been, well, we can just have really nice equipment. We can even buy a team jet. We can buy, a brand new bus. But it still begs the question of, is there like a few players who are really just making you a ton of money? Mm-hmm. Because I'm telling you right now, free tuition, they don't even care. Like, that's a joke. All right. So I definitely think players should get paid because they're objectively working and they're creating a lot of value, and they should be able to share in that value. Do not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. So if you got players out there, they are the ones treading the grain. Don't muzzle them. Let them eat from what they're making.
There was it reminds me of back when I was in, 3 years after I graduated was when they started paying athletes, basically.
Yeah. You should sue or something like that,
Yeah, it's all long gone.
At least send an email like, hey, listen.
Send an email and see what happens. I think I got to check at some point.
It'll be a total bogus threat, but just be like, listen, you better send me a check in reverse of this.
I was with the New Mexico Lobos. We were lucky to have 5,000 people in the stands during the football game.
You know how much money I personally brought in?
So the amount of time that it would take for me to write that email, and if they actually did fairly pay me what I deserved, I would have already made it doing something else.
Yeah, they're going to email you back, you owe us money. Yeah.
But anyways, I had a friend that went to Berkeley.
Okay.
Before he transferred to New Mexico. Yeah. And they were getting the same size scholarship checks which was like $900 a month, as me in New Mexico. And they're living in Northern California where the expenses are like 300%. And so these guys at the time, is before they can get paid and all that stuff, they literally had to stay in like 5 athletes in like 2-bedroom houses, still grinding, still waking up at 5 a.m. to go to the morning workouts, still doing all the school studies. And of course, like you might have a summer job.
Were they doing the school studies or?
Somebody was doing them. At Berkeley, they're pretty.
That's probably true.
Yeah, Berkeley was a little bit different though, but still doing all the other normal responsibilities. But like this school in the Pac-12 is making who knows how much at the time, and you got athletes that are sharing a living room.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean it's again like there's definitely universities that probably. Like the example you gave with New Mexico, it's like I'm sure 5,000 people is a lot. If that's a regular number, it doesn't sound like a lot compared to Ohio State bringing in whatever 80,000 a game. But if 5,000 people are paying $50, I don't know what's my quick math there. Am I $250K? Am I
something like that? Yeah.
Quick math. I don't know.
25,000.
Maybe I'm off by zeros. I have no idea. But my point is like it's a good bit of money, and then you have the television rights and radio and. Advertising going on like around the field. So yeah, the question is like, is it profitable or is the school just, making sacrifices to make it happen? But if it's profitable, it's like, who should share in these profits?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I am an employee, right, there's not a profit sharing agreement necessarily with an employee-employer relationship. There can be, but they're going to be paying me to do my work. And so there's still a measure of contract where I'm sharing in the profits, right, of the company to a degree, even though it's an hourly profit. If the profit's not there, then guess who's going to lose their job because it's just not bringing in the money. So, yeah, I'm all for athletes making money. I think it increases competition. It increases excellence. It allows for... just more people to share in the immensely valuable enterprise that it is. It is their right to do so. I believe.
So when you think about this, we know we have a proneness to take any good thing and corrupt it.
Yeah.
What corruption could come about from having to now pay these young people? Like we have quarterbacks like signing up for like $7 million a year.
Yeah.
Like on average. Like your average quarterbacks are doing that.
I think due to the uniquely ungodly context of a college or university, there's going to be a lot of squandering. And
so you mean like guys just going out and doing cake stands every
there's just going to be so much folly when money is gained hastily.
Right.
So, this kid is a month out removed from graduating high school, which he probably was a fool in high school. And now he just got even a more average athlete just picked up $500K. You're like, hey, I don't know if like you're going to have to start discipling these men. And I'm using that term broadly to be wise. Otherwise, you're about to have a lot of problems that student athletes didn't have prior. Can they buy homes? Like, can they go on vacation? Like, it just creates some different dynamics on the teams that you're now going to have because you got that rich player on the team. Like, there's just going to have to be a lot more discipleship to keep teams unified, to keep teams battling with the goal of like, hey, we're trying to win a championship, as opposed to I'm just trying to get mine and move on. And that's, I think, what I hear a lot of the coaches complain about is now it's like, the transfer portal, you got people being recruited, but it's like, yeah, that's the nature of a free market. And because there was so much pent up, or rather suppression of the free market, it's going to take a number of years for the free market to stabilize.
Yeah, correct itself.
Yeah.
So when you think, okay, so now I'll speak to the Christian athlete that is wanting to honor God as they go to school, but they realize they have this talent and this ability to take it to a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially all the best schools to go to, it's probably not the type of education that is actually going to increase your relationship with Christ, and your understanding and appreciation of his glory. What does that athlete do? This is life-changing money that in the right hands could do amazing, wonderful things, or is it just like not even worth it to go in that direction? What's the advice to the Christian athlete that's in that position?
My advice is most often for no Christian, period, remove the athlete portion to go to university unless the burden of proof is high enough that this is going to be a wise choice, that it's going to be a wise investment of their time and often a lot of money. Even if they have a scholarship from a family member or something, that's real dollars that's being spent on this. Is that a good investment? If they have a scholarship from the university, then sure, like there's no other, the university is going to just give that to somebody else. So that's always going to be scholarship money no matter what. So there isn't much to contemplate. Well, what else could I possibly do with this? You know, if grandma's going to give me 50 grand for university, if I were to go to grandma and say, hey, I'm giving you a business plan, can I start this business with this money or purchase a home or get married? That's what I encourage a lot of Christians to do when they have money coming from parents or grandparents, is to calculate the dollar amount and figure out what are my other options. It might be wisest to go to university. That might be a good investment. But if you're just going to go to university because that's what everyone else is doing, you don't have much of a vision for what you're going to accomplish there, the job that it might bring forth, and as you brought up, the education you're going to get. Is it actually worth that much money? Then don't go. And that would be the same for athletes. In fact, how much more than I would actually say if athletes are getting paid, then I would just see it as a job opportunity, even if it's just for a year or two. As far as the nature of universities being, I would argue, up there in the top ungodliest places in our country are college campuses, like across the board, even a lot of Christian ones. And if we were to limit it down to like truly Christian campuses where your normal day, you're going to be an edified student that is pushed and enculturated into a love of the Lord, we're talking about a very handful of universities. So the student athlete, I'm going to say, yeah, go take that job offer, go find a good church, because a lot of these are in cities, and there's often good churches in a lot of cities. And it's going to be similar to how I would counsel a member who's just moving, even, for another job. Like, hey, is there a good church in that city? Because if there's not a good church, I probably wouldn't go. I would take another job offer. And if this athlete's got a decent offer from one school, he can probably get it from another school. So I would say find a church, and then take the job offer. Go to that church and go take the money and work hard. And that's a cool job to have for a couple of years, maybe even 4 years. Maybe it even goes to pros. For a lot of them, no. But it'll still be probably far above average money than they would have made at 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, it's like, to me, it sounds like it's just more about every situation is going to be pretty unique with each athlete, Christian. And you said a key point about finding a church. It also starts with their church at home too, and having the relationship with, because it's even easy for parents to have a bias. Like there's a lot of pride in being able to say that, like, my son is at Tennessee on a full ride scholarship and they're paying him $3 million a year to be there. Yeah. Like that is just like, it's tempting to even want to say like, wow, you've done a great job. Yeah. Just off of just that information. Yeah. But there's more to think through than that. Yeah. And you've got to pull in more people than just your parents. Yep. Even for myself, that would have been helpful during my recruiting process. Like, I was the first one to get recruited out of college, first one to get a full ride scholarship. My parents didn't know anything about the recruiting game. So even just the recruiting game alone, I could have used
some counsel.
Yeah, some counsel on. And so that's why I'm glad you brought up churches, because churches are just huge as far as wise counsel goes. Yep. If you're at the right church that is upholding the Bible as the ultimate standard of truth. Yeah. But that's a real critical point there. Yep. How about we talk about the Church of California?
Yeah. What part?
The LGBTQ Church of California. That's
Yes.
their headship is
That's actually a state.
Gavin
It's a
Newsom.
state-sponsored church. So California does not actually like state separation of church and state. They love to have their state church, and that is the LGBTQT plus Church of California. You're exactly right.
As Dave Chappelle says, the alphabet people.
Yes, yes. They have their confessions, their creeds, their songs, their requirement for you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And they have their gospel, they have their condemnation and their wrath. It is in every way, shape, and form a church. They have their ecclesia, their gatherings. But as far as sports goes, we do have some news.
Yeah, so
our boy...
Yeah, read that quote from Gavin Newsom.
Our boy Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and he is a fool. I aim to give governors honor per the office, even if they're not honorable men. This guy's such a fool at this point. He's really not. He's more worth mocking. But he said he was on a podcast with Charlie Kirk, I think the founder and certainly the head of Turning Point, and
which is interesting that he even sat down with him in the first place.
Yeah, bold move a bit on both their parts. I appreciate boldness, so I guess I'll give them both some points for that.
More of that is happening.
Yeah, it's good.
Candace Owens was on Stephen A. Smith's podcast. That's two different worlds.
Yeah,
as well.
So they're talking. This is just a week or two ago, and Gavin Newsom brought up transgender athletes. I think Charlie Kirk brought it up. I didn't watch the interview. I just saw the clip of this portion of it. And I think Charlie Kirk brought up, hey, what are your thoughts on transgender dudes? So these are dudes. When I say transgender dudes, I mean men who think they're women and being in women's sports. And you'll note it is never the other way around.
Yeah, right.
Never the other way around. And quote, Newsom said, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you, Charlie Kirk, on that. It is an issue of fairness. It's deeply unfair. I'm not wrestling with the fairness issue. I totally agree with you. End quote.
That's a condemning quote.
Wow. That's a pretty massive departure from his party, who unequivocally bows the knee to whatever the new letter is added onto and whatever fruits that requires you to partake in, which at this point for transgenders means sports. Sports are main where it's like, are we an accepted people or not?
Yeah.
And are you going to bow to our demands or not?
How much of this is quality control? Like Trump just had an overwhelming win.
Yep.
And Gavin is seeing the tide turn a little bit.
Yeah.
Is he trying to jump on this wave slightly?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a classic in all the bad ways politician, not a truly classic politician, one who was a statesman willing to serve their country and stand on principle. So he's a more modern classic in that you kind of always assume, and rightly so, because you've learned it from watching him, that he's just edging however he can for power and authority. And so he's willing to shift from one position to the next as long as he can maintain power. That's his guiding principle. And that's what I think he's doing. He saw, okay, the people we've pushed too far as Democrats, we've progressed too far on some issues. And if I, Gavin Newsom, want a chance at being president, which he wants, and to maintain certainly high political office, which he definitely wants, then, and he will eventually, I'm confident, run for president purely or merely for more reasons, but if nothing less, just because he's the governor of California, because California is a juggernaut of a state in our republic of states, and therefore ordinarily people who go from or governor of California end up as presidents, or at least trying to. And so, yeah, I think he did see the win, and he thought, if I don't pull back, I'm not going to win future elections when I move to the federal level. If that's what just happened at the federal level, then I need to make some shifts. And it's not principled. again, the guiding principle is I need to maintain winning and power.
So how do you know it's not like just a genuine heart change?
Because his next line, I'll read, said, there's also humility and grace that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety, and depression. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address the issue with the kind of decency that I think is inherent in you, Charlie Kirk, but not always expressed on the issue, but at the same time deal with unfairness? And I watched the clip. He goes on to basically just...
So he's basically saying these people are sad.
Yeah.
But it's also unfair to let them do what they want. And I'm caught in the middle. That's kind of what that sounds like.
That's exactly what he's saying. And of course it begs the question, well, why are they so uniquely sad? Mm-hmm. Is there something fundamental to what they deem fundamental that's fundamentally wrong? Right? So he thinks, okay, they are literally killing themselves at higher rates than every other identified class, like self-identifying class of people, bar none. Nobody comes close. And so if I can reduce that percentage just by a little by having a dude win a championship, I'm going to do that. It's like, or you actually address the fundamental problem that says there's something wrong with their ideology if the fruits of the tree are high suicide, depression, and sadness rates, like very, very high rates. So instead of manning up and actually caring for them, loving them, as Christians are to do, by telling them the truth, which sets us free, he's just cowardly playing pragmatism, or playing the pragmatist and just saying, well, I can keep everyone happy by sympathizing with it, allowing it to happen sometimes when it's convenient. When it gets pushed too far politically, then I can say something like, oh, yeah, I know it's not fair, but in front of transgender, I'm going to say, but I support you and I love you. And you don't need to change it all. It's like, no, or you just man up and you say, no, you guys do need to change. The proof is in the pudding. Your fruits, you'll know a tree by its fruits. Yeah. And they need actually men who can help them. Particularly the men trying to be women need men.
Let's bring that home into even the more personal state. We have the Christian that has the cousin or the sister, brother, who is given in or struggling with this ideology, from a distance when it's not in our back door, it is funny because sin is also funny in a lot of ways too. But then it can also hit home in a little more serious note in other ways too. So like how could someone handle that conversation if there's someone that comes to mind, like, oh, well, my transgender daughter is, I don't even know how to, my transgender son, man, see, you can't even think of it right, but my son thinks he's a girl.
Yeah, there it
my
is.
son thinks he's a girl. How are we addressing that? How do they address that? How do they handle that situation?
Well, first, a lot of repentance, because if you got to that point, you've done a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
So that does not happen overnight. That's a long process to so pervert the nature of who you are as a boy that you actually think you're a girl. So likely you have fully enculturated them into a culture that loves transgenderism, sodomy, and general sexual license. If they were in a culture, if they were enculturated into a Christian culture, that wouldn't be a thing. So I'm not saying the temptation towards sexual license would never be there, but there is a degradation to sexual license.
And someone would push back and say, well, my daughter, my son grew up in the church and we prayed every day and XYZ, and somehow she's like this, but she loves the Lord.
Yeah, he loved listening to Pastor Mary give all her admonishments to him. I mean, it's probably a very effeminate church that confused the gender roles. Egalitarianism theology, that is the position that For men and women to be equal, they must be able to perform the same roles. Okay. That is the soil that is required for transgenderism to sprout. So there are many evangelical churches that are egalitarian.
Like we start blurring the line of these distinctions between
They've been
men
blurring
and
the
women.
lines for decades
Right.
with their husband and wife duo pastors or just straight up female pastors. And they would say, of course, transgenderism is too far, but it's like you blurred the line. And so, yeah, you're pharisaically saying, well, I wouldn't go that far. That's evil over there. But what you did was evil. The standard is God and his word. So we just submit to God and his word, and we recognize it's a good standard. So when God made men and women, he made them different. They have different commands, and just in the New Testament alone, because no one would say the Old Testament is not flatly and plainly patriarchal. But in the New Testament, you have 1 Peter 3, you have 1 Corinthians 14, you have Titus chapter 2, you have 1 Timothy 2. I mean, these are just off the top of my head. Ephesians 5. And the roles, these are all texts pertaining to men's and women's roles, differing roles, okay? And they're all rooted in transcendent things. The law of God, 1 Corinthians 14, the gospel, Ephesians 5, and creation in Timothy and 1 Corinthians 11, rooted in creation. All that to say, they're transcendent. They're transcendent roles. Men and women are different. There's a lot of similarities, yes. No one's neglecting that. But they are distinctly different, and they have different roles in the home, in the church, and in society. Not just the home and not just the church, but also in society. Yeah, I mean...
that's a good point. Last pushback question before we move on to the next topic. Yeah. For those that would... Well, growing up, I never really wanted to play with dolls. I wanted to play sports. Mm-hmm. I never really wanted to cook. I wanted to be outside in the dirt. Mm-hmm. Vice versa with the guys. Like I wanted to be in the kitchen. And so they see... one of the arguments out there is they see these distinct roles and they said like, well, I naturally didn't want to do those things. Mm-hmm. So that means I'm more so identified this way. That's an argument. So how do we respond to that?
Likely the parents did not disciple their loves to love what they should have loved. Mm. So somewhere along the line, the mom was not mothering and performing her duties in a lovable, attractive way as wife and homemaker, to where her daughter just thought, of course I'd want to be that. That's the most glorious woman I've ever seen. That is womanhood in all its glory. I want that. So somewhere along the line, the mother was failing to teach that, which probably stems from the husband ultimately failing to disciple his wife and disciple his daughter. And so it's going to go back to the husband 99.9% of the time. And the husband's responsible. So even in that 0.01%, the husband's still responsible. But often it's more directly from the husband just failing to disciple his household, shepherd his household, to see the glory of masculinity for boys to see that, and the glory of femininity for women to girls to see that.
That's a great point, because circling it back into sports and to why we're always comparing WNBA to NBA and any other thing you want to try to compare. Uh-huh. I think it's because when you take that truth and apply it over here, we see men getting much, much glory in sports, which are amazing feats that they're doing, and that being the only thing described or talked about and praised. Mm-hmm. And women are like, well, we're not praised for all the things that even got these men to this point.
Yep.
And so they try to jump into these roles of men like, you know what, instead of doing my thing that I'm getting zero glory and acknowledgement for, I'm going to go jump into try to do men, and still can't, across the spectrum, still can't do it in the same way the man can. And so they still don't even get the glory. Yeah. And then they're also not doing what God created them to do. So now we have this spiraling effect. Yeah. Do you see that truth applied in that same way?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have so devalued women and womanhood and femininity that I sympathize entirely with women who are having an existential crisis because womanhood is at an all-time low as far as a stock you want to invest in. So most girls are growing up and they're thinking, man, yeah, the men get the glory, so I just want to be like men, I guess, because having children is frowned upon. And certainly having a lot of children is frowned upon. Even being a wife, which is a requirement to have children, is also frowned upon. Mm. So I got my main duties, according to God, are all heavily frowned upon, which shouldn't surprise us. Of course, the world often frowns upon the good things of God. But a church, therefore, needs to regularly, pastors, parents need to regularly put before their children the glory. I don't think there's anything more glorious than being a mother and a wife. So being a husband and father is, right up there with it. I'm not saying those are radically different, but being a mother is very unique. Okay, that's nothing a husband can partake in, and praise God. Okay,
I can't even burp my daughter and have a conversation.
Yeah,
at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's night and day how much better women are at mothering.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we need to build them up that this is glorious. You're raising immortal souls who will, Lord willing, last 1,000 generations that you'll get to unfold from the great cloud of witnesses watching from you and from all of your hard work. And of course, dad's a big part of that too, but without mom, it's not possible, right? Mm-hmm. Dad's a little bit more disposable, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, dad is essential to the rock of the household, but you know what I mean. So yeah, we got to paint that glory that, hey, shooting a basketball is not a big deal.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Nothing compared to being a wife and a mom. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And we see that. Last thing I'll say is in a lot of these athletes, they often thank their mom, right?
Yeah.
When they get drafted. Watch draft day. How many kids are crying in their mom's arms? The mom at that moment is not thinking, I want to be in the WNBA. She's rejoicing that she raised a son who made it and is now appreciating her. That's all she wants. Are you kidding me? That's so much more glorious than her being in the WNBA and her son watching his mom in the WNBA. Come on. Get out of here.
Oh, moving on to some lighter things.
Yeah.
Depending on how you take it, what community that you're in.
Yeah.
But you went to the inaugural opener for San Diego FC.
Yes, sir. And we are good. All right. So watch some FC games. We are currently I think we're 2-0-1.
Okay.
So I think we got one tie. The game I went to, 0-0 tie. Very boring. But there was something exciting that happened. First starting priming the story a little bit. Inaugural game, long time coming, years in the making to have San Diego FC. San Diego is a soccer city. So the fact that we didn't have a pro team is pretty astonishing. We broke every record. This will put it in perspective. We broke every record for female soccer, pro soccer, there is in the female equivalent. So we were very primed for a men's thing. If you got people turning out for that, how much more will people come out for the men? So anyway, our mayor of San Diego is a sodomite. I think he's the first open sodomite ever to be mayor of San Diego. When he gets an award, he got an award because he was a part of helping, get the team, whatever. The entire place booed. I'm talking 35,000 people booing at this guy. It probably wasn't that unanimous, but it was pretty strong. The boos were overwhelming. Okay.
It wasn't like his name was Luke and they were like,
no.
Luke.
Let's go, Brandon. So then fast forward, I guess it's part of Mexican. So I'm there, I'm observing the game and watching the chants. I'm just enjoying every bit of it. And I noticed that when the other team would do a goal kick, they would, thousands upon thousands of San Diego FC fans would do this chant that as he's about to kick, they would start to go, boo. And then when he hits the ball, they would go, toe. And it was dialed in. and it was so dialed in. I'm like, man, when did they learn these chants? Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know there was a day we're going to learn
send out an
chants.
email
Yeah,
with a
like,
YouTube
what is
link
going
or-
on? It was, I mean, so many people were in on it. And after like the second or third time of the goal kick, all of a sudden it comes on the big screen, and I'm gonna read that. I had that pulled up. It said, discrimination has no place in our sport and in our stadiums and will not be tolerated. The fan chant that was just used is offensive, and we ask that fans do not continue to use this chant. Thank you. And the guy is reading it, like the game's going on, but he's distracting everyone reading this thing on here. And I still didn't even know exactly what was going on, because the chant, that chant that I just said, is Spanish, and it means male prostitute, and you can imagine some other slang words, all right, that are associated with it. And I had a guy, a couple of Mexican guys right behind me who were like cracking up when that thing came on there. And so I asked them, I was like, what does this mean? And they're the ones who told me, and they used a couple other slang words that I won't use right now. But nonetheless, male prostitute was the first thing they said. And then they said a word that starts with an F and goes A, anyway, you got it. And I was like, oh, and he said, and I quote, he said, every Mexican learns this as like one of the first 10 words. Like every single Mexican. And he said that the Mexican national team, all right, this is what we do at Mexican national games. So the Mexico national team, every goal kick, we say this chant. And so I ended up looking it up, and it made it on ESPN. I mean, it was like on national news of like brand new team, first game, and the game's hampered because of the chant. So the head coach had to say something, and it's this whole thing. And for the purposes of our podcast, I'll just say and pose this question as we wrap up, but it's discrimination by what standard? And they're ignorant because they ended up threatening that they're going to stop the game, and there's a threat that the next game is this coming Saturday, and that they might stop the game if the chant continues, which is discriminatory. So the question is, you're discriminating against someone no matter what. The Mexican culture is saying, this is part of our culture. We say this chant. I'm thousands upon thousands of people saying the chant. So you're discriminating against these people who sacrificed. They probably tailgated all day. They've spent a lot of money at your game. They bought the jerseys. They're at the first game. And you're discriminating against them. By what standard can you discriminate against them in the name of saying discrimination? The way you're presenting it rhetorically is that all discrimination is wrong, but you're failing to recognize you're discriminating against these people. So time avails us to go into all the details of, what's right or wrong there. But I just point out the nature of discrimination, that no, everyone has a standard, and everyone's always discriminating against somebody. The question is, by what standard are we discriminatory, and therefore is it ethical, this form of discrimination? But it was pretty interesting, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen on Saturday at the game. But what are your thoughts?
I think it makes me, it's trying to take away freedom of speech. It also makes me wonder, like, why are we taking ourselves so seriously? We're at a game, we're at a match.
Yeah.
That's what the thing that always gets me is if you play a board game with me, if you play any kind of sport with me, like, I'm going to make you feel bad verbally in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it's not because I genuinely hate you as a person. But it's a part of the game. It's a part of the culture of sports. Like Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, all of our favorite athletes talk trash. Like that was American culture.
Yeah.
And so when the fans do it and then the players get offended by it, or like, oh, they use this and that, but like it is not respectable to be a male prostitute.
Nope.
Like,
not at all.
Shape or form.
Yeah, I mean, no pun intended, but the fact that you're offended that you're the butt end of a joke is your own problem.
No pun intended.
King Asa in First King. He is praised for the first thing he did was get rid of the male called prostitutes. It's a good thing. All right. So I have actually no problem with that being a mockery.
Yeah.
And we should be such a culture that we understand there's a place for mocking. So like a sport, okay, don't be disrespectful in any kind of serious context. But the dude's just kicking the ball up the field. Like let's just come on.
Yeah. Right.
Like nobody looked him up to see if he's heterosexual or not. But may we live in a day where he hopefully is heterosexual, so it's rolling off his back.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you for coming to CSPN today.